glad you're here, whether you're a big part of our community already or you're new tonight. We're really, really glad you're here. And I trust that you will get what you came for. That something about tonight will touch your heart or open something up in your mind that will lead you further along your path. And we are entrusting you to Him. And I'm standing on my toes. I've always had to stand on my toes with Joe. And I'm doing it again to reach this microphone. He's way tall. Joe is the priest of the Archdiocese of St. Louis. He's the second of 6 kids here in St. Louis, Missouri his whole life. He's somebody who loves God a ton and shows that in his enthusiasm for life. He's a good travel buddy. He's a good friend. He's a great support to me as a person and as a priest. If we've had any success here, it's largely owed to friends like Joe who believe in me and who let me be Gary in my own insane way along the way, but it means the world to me. Joe is the pastor currently of Sacred Heart, Most Sacred Heart in Eureka, and he's founder of a nonprofit called Gospel Values. And all the profits of all of his books and all of his videos and all the things he's produced, all of those go to causes that he believes in. He doesn't make anything on any of this. He's just that kind of guy, and I'm telling you, he's been like that his whole life, because we met when he was 18, and I was way older than that. So Joe has led Gospel Values through a lot of changes, and they're just doing great. You can check out gospelvaluesonline.com if you want to learn more about it. He always has a beautiful message of Jesus for children of all ages. Joe's written a book called No One Cries the Wrong Way, which tonight is a riff off that in some ways, and a number of books for children, including My Sister's Annoying, You Want Me to Be Good All Day, and Don't Drink the Holy Water. In addition, he's written or produced a CD of guided prayer reflections, and he's probably best known for his video works, including a mini retreat video for catechists and for family living. Joe brings a love of storytelling, a heart for God's people, and a desire to help us remember those things that really matter. To Joe Kempf.
Not knowing how the game would turn out, we had 2 different possible beginnings here. I am relieved we're not going there tonight. We'll dig in. So, one Friday last year, it was the 2nd graders' turn to do the readings at Mass, and one of the little readers was sick the day before when they practiced. And the next morning she came and the teacher said, "Are you okay to do the reading?" She said, "Oh, I'm fine, I practice at home." She goes, "Oh no, I mean, do you feel good enough?" She said, "Oh, I'm fine, Mrs. Baldwin. It was just morning sickness." As is likely true for you, some things make me laugh, some things make me cry, and often enough, I do both at the very same time. And tonight, we're going to jump into a bit of all of it. Just thanks so much for being here. I don't know all of you. I have no doubt but that I am in the midst of so many good people through whom God does so much good. I'm just honored to be with you. I'm really glad about this time. The efforts that sponsored this, I think, is called Friends of the CSC. It sounds like a wonderful idea, really. This is a great place, which does and has done and will continue to do so much good, partly through the efforts of my good friend, Father Gary Brown, and mostly, I think, through all of you. As one of my parishioners says of me, "Isn't it amazing what we can do in spite of our priests?" At least in my case. At heart, I am mostly a pastor. I'm a parish priest. I occasionally go on the road to speak. When I do, I usually know, if anybody, just a few people. It is really something to come tonight where I know so many of you. And Gary knows this. I am jealous of him that he gets to see you on such a regular basis. But I am glad to be with you. You are always welcome at most Sacred Heart. It's in Eureka. That's the Pope. Tell him I'm behaving. Follows me everywhere. Most Sacred Heart in Eureka. We have a new campaign slogan. Well, actually, we have a newer one than this, but it used to be, you can use our bathrooms on the way to Six Flags. Our claim to fame, right? But now, okay, I love this. We had a bear in our school. I'd love to end the talk and start talking about that right now, but I'm going to switch. So here's what we're going to do during our time together. We'll first look at some coping skills that I've learned from moms over the years that we'll share with you. Two, we'll work on perspective to keep hope alive. We will work on, and I find this one particularly funny, it gives me how to handle stressful situations. Whoever saw the squares on their feet and thought of that, I think is awesome. We'll also remember a bit how not to handle stress. And finally, now this one you might have to look closely. We just take a quick look at how church history and secular culture interface. You have to look at the book. That guy thinks he is so funny. Okay, that was actually for a different presentation. I just grabbed the wrong intro, sorry. This presentation will have 5 parts. You do not have to write these down or revisit them. I just want you to hear them for a moment. Each of these 5 will begin with a question and build on the one before it. The 5 questions are: 1, where does it hurt to be you? 2, how often do you think about your own death? And when you do, what is that like for you? 3, what about the death of a loved one? Facing that. Have you ever walked through that with somebody? Or what do you think about that? 4, how would you finish this sentence after someone dies, ... And what are the top 10 things to say or not to say to somebody who's grieving? After all of that, now that's a lot of content, right? We will hopefully have time to end with a guided meditation, unless you keep interrupting me with applause. My friends joining table use that language. I think that's awesome. There'll be a few quick breaks, a little bit of time for question and answer. Feel free to run out screaming at any point. I am already embarrassed that we'll be talking about such important topics so briefly. And I know myself, I know I will go home and go, I wish I had said this, oh man. But I have been praying earnestly that during this bit of time, God will work through me, that God will work in me, and that God will work in spite of me, and that there is at least one thing tonight that God wanted you to hear. So let's begin. Part 1, where does it hurt to be you? Let us pray. I miss my dog. He died, you know. Now things just aren't the same. We used to hike and run around and play all kinds of games. Even though I miss him here, the house seems quiet now. I hope, God, he's truly happy that he's with you somehow. So many different things that lead to grief. The death of a beloved pet is a big deal. And I'm sorry if anybody ever made you feel that it wasn't that. things that stir up heartache, right? Divorce, chronic illness, inability to conceive a child, job loss, an unwanted move. Our grief responses have similarities no matter what the source of the loss, right? Maybe you've recently lost your job, or have someone cheated on you, or walked away. Perhaps your name's been unfairly maligned. Maybe you got a diagnosis you feared, or a loved one did. However the heartache visits you, it visits us all. I will say this very briefly about God. I did not look to this to be, I'm not even hardly to address this at all. But I do know that in the face of suffering, some people choose to believe there is no God. I mean, if God is so good, why do innocent people suffer, right? And how do we reconcile the idea of the amazing God I believe in and the god-awful suffering so many people know? That is the subject of a whole different presentation. I'll simply say this. I do not believe that God sends us suffering for any of the purposes that we suggest. I do not believe that God sends us suffering at all. You know all this stupid, if you don't mind that word, cliches we use at funeral homes and other places, that hospital beds. God never gives you more than you can handle, right? Gosh, I'm standing as a deacon next to a woman whose 13-year-old daughter had died, and one person after another said things like that. The pastor came up to her, and God needed another angel. And even the ubiquitous, everything happens for a reason. Now, I will never stop the world from saying that. But I always will interrupt it, unless it's a public venue, and say, if you mean by that, God can bring good from everything, I'm with you, because I've seen it. If you mean God sends you this suffering for some better purpose, I do not believe that. How many people had said that to her, she turned to me, and she smiled and said, you want me to pray to a God who would kill my daughter for some better reason? She goes, you tell me what reason would be good enough. And then she said, I do not believe that God killed my daughter. I said, Gene, I don't believe God killed your daughter either. Suffering is not God's idea. And at the very same time, whenever suffering visits, God is there. I absolutely believe that. And if I were to summarize, and I took this slide out, I don't know why, but one of the most profound spiritual truths I know is that the world is both and, not either or, at the very same time. I'll tell you a story, I'll give you one personal example, and I'll end with a story. This is the longest of the 5 sections, so hang on. The story was told to me by a man named Solomon Rosenberg. Actually, I read his writing on this. He had been interred in a Nazi concentration camp. It was a work camp, which meant as long as you were considered a good worker, you were allowed to live. They immediately took out his aged parents and killed them. He worried always about his younger boy, David, who had a slight weakness in his leg. He always worried that one day they were going to say he was not a good enough worker. So every day he'd come back from his work detail and try to find his family. And one day he came back and couldn't find any of them. And he found his older boy sitting in the corner weeping. He said, they came for David today, didn't they? And he said, through his tears, yes, they said he could no longer work. And Solomon said he could feel his heart break. He said, where's Bondo? She's a good worker. Certainly they would not take her. And he said, David was so scared when they came for her. Mom said, you don't have to be afraid. I will go with you and hold you close. And so she went to the gas chamber to hold her son so he wouldn't have to die alone. That is the God I believe in. And that's why almost every Catholic institution has a crucifix in it, right? We don't have a God aloof from pain, removed, a God who said, I will be with you in it. There is nothing you will suffer or die that I won't be there with you, because I will. Personally, I'm trying to hang on to that one these days in a few situations. So when I see people who are hurting, I tell myself, all the love of the universe is with them. And then I try to let that be enough. And I'm not doing really great on that in one case right now. Some of you might know I have a niece named Jessie who's 41 years old, single, lives in California. has autoimmune diseases which cause her core muscles to spasm, which 2 years ago broke her spine, and this time broke her spine so bad she couldn't even walk. And so they did some pretty rugged surgeries on her, only to put a cage around her spine so that the ravages of the disease won't break her spine any further, but won't really fix anything beyond that. In the process, she lost bladder function probably forever. Her boyfriend decided that was it, and she just got out of the hospital with 104 fever and just about septic. So I tell myself that something I believe in, all the love in the universe is with her. And then I try to let that be enough, and I'm not doing really good on that one right now. I remind myself, I believe that you'll never hear me say, "Oh, don't worry, everything will be okay," because I'm not so stupid. I'm stupid in many ways, not that way. I don't know that. But I believe that every person has what they need to be okay. I believe that. I really do. I tell myself that that is true of Jesse, and then I try to hang on to that as enough. I'm glad this is the first time I've ever been able to talk about that in a long time without crying. The truth is, you and I are richly blessed, and life is hard, and the good and the bad don't cancel each other out. So I'll end part one with this story told by one of my siblings, Father Bill Kempf. When he was pastor at St. Anne's in Normandy, I might want to make sure I don't misquote anything. The 8th graders were, he said, Mrs. Kenny, the first grade teacher, was visibly moved by the Stations of the Cross. The 8th graders were acting them out tableau style. I don't know if you've ever seen that, where they freeze, right, and then the light shines up and they have a little narration, they go to the next one. He said it was the 13th station which I would have had to look up somehow, he probably knew by heart, where Mary holds the dead body of her son when Mrs. Kenny's tears began to flow. And the little first grader right next to her noticed, and the little girl wrapped her hands around her teacher's arm and just kind of rested her head right there. After a bit, she looked up and said, "Mrs. Kenny, can I say something that might help?" And of course, she said. The little girl looked up at her and said, "He didn't stay dead." That's the hope to which I cling, right? That if Jesus did not remain in the grips of death, if the tomb could not and would not hold his one life, not hold us either in this life or the life beyond. So there's an essentially tragic nature to human life, yet love is ultimately victorious. Everyone suffers. No one suffers alone. There's a life beyond what we can see, and he didn't stay dead. That's the promise to which I cling. Part 2. There's a clicking. Is that the metal plate in my head, you think? Is that, am I too close or too far away right here? Now, before I go to bed at night, I read the comic strips. We used to call them the funny pages, I don't know if that's whatever. In part 2, how often do you think about your own death? I want to be clear that we're not going to talk about those kinds of things that could lead to death. Like this. In case you can't read this one, I will give you the heads up. The woman's husband is on the phone speaking to his wife who's in the car. She's pulling up to a driveway. It says, you can hear her husband going, "Well, you have gained a few pounds and you've been kind of judgy lately, so maybe just a little." She says, "No, Bob, I said I'm turning into my mother's." Speaking of things which could lead to an early death. So, we're not going to look into the causes of death and look instead at the reality of our death, whatever this verse might be. Now, my favorite comic strip these days is called Pearls Before Swine. Oh, I just love it. There's this sweet, innocent, gullible pig. There's this dark, sarcastic rat who is kind of like the hero. I mean, not the hero, he's like the main character on some level. He's an intelligent goat, whatever. So anyway, here, goat asks pig a question. He asks, if I do this right, what's the one thing you want to do before you die? Pig answers, magically prevent it. I thought that one through. No. We won't be able to do that. So let's talk a little bit about facing our own death, and then we'll talk a little bit about facing the death of a loved one. When a friend asked John Quincy Adams when he was 80 years of age how he was, he gave this response. John is very well, thank you. But the house he lives in, speaking of his body, is sadly dilapidated. It's teetering on its foundations. The walls are badly shattered and the roof is worn. The building trembles with every wind, and I think John Quincy Adams will have to move out of it before long. But he himself is very well. I love that, right? He got the distinction that even death does nothing to diminish our dignity. And even though right now spiritually I'm struggling a little bit spiritually, that the people I love, Jesse in particular and another staff person on it, have everything they need to be okay. Thankfully, I do not struggle these days with fear about life after death. I don't. I feel like I've already somehow tasted the timeless. I think it's going to be life and goodness. I'm not worried about that. Now, I'm not excited to do it. Okay? First, there's a lot more people for me to annoy. And who was it? Maybe it was Woody Allen said, well, I'm not worried about death. I just don't want to be there when it happens. But I'm of an age where death gets closer, right? And I think there's a wisdom for each of us to, from time to time, look at it, right? Because it gives an urgency and a focus about the time I have now. Philip of Macedon, when he was king, gave one of his slaves the strange order. Every day this slave was to march in unannounced at various times, whatever the setting was, point at him and yell, "You are going to die." That'd be great in the middle of a bowel movement. Wouldn't that be? And the king did this because he said that he knew he needed this kind of reminder to help him keep perspective about life. I would think such a reminder might be a gift to us as well, right? An awareness of the shortness of our lives gives us kind of an urgency. Am I living those things that I say I value? We sometimes get so caught up in things that seemingly are so important that in the end, they don't really matter so much. I've been at the bedside of many a dying person. I have never once heard a person lament, if only I had spent more time at the office. Or my one regret in life is I don't have a bigger stock portfolio. I have never heard that. I've heard lots of lament. And facing the realities of our own deaths they kind of invite us to wake us up to how we live now. Now, I'm talking about something much more important than what we sometimes refer to as a bucket list. Back to pearls before swine. Pig has an interesting thought. What are you writing, Pig? A bucket list of all the things I'd like to do before I die. Stand on it, put it on head, roll it down the street. You know, things on your bucket list don't have to involve buckets. Oh, now that broadens things. Now, one could argue that there are several different kinds of sets of virtues. I've heard this described as resume virtues and eulogy virtues. Resume virtues are the skills we bring to the marketplace. Eulogy virtues are the ones that are talked about at our funerals. Were we loving? Were we kind? Were we brave? Were we honest? Were we faithful? This story. Years ago, Alfred Nobel, the man who invented dynamite, sat down to have a cup of coffee and opened a newspaper and saw, and to his surprise, read his own obituary. Newspaper reporter had misunderstood it was his brother who died, but he thought it was Alfred. So, as you can imagine, this was interesting to read, but it gave him this fascinating opportunity to see what would be written about him upon his death. Now, remember, he had invented dynamite. His obituary described him accurately as the dynamite king who had spent his life making instruments of death and destruction. This was not the legacy that Alfred Nobel wanted to leave. And so he decided to change his life. And not only did he decide that, he actually did. He changed his life so much so that years later, annual prizes would be awarded in physics, chemistry, medicine, literature, and peace. He went from being the dynamite king to the one for whom the Nobel Peace Prize is named. And I think that's the wisdom of looking at our lives. Am I living those things I say that I value or not? And we have this chance. Life is short. On your way out, our sponsor and cohort, or we can pass that later, I hand you one of these. It's just for your homework if you would like to. It's how to write your own obituary. You fill in the blank. Blank died today at blank. Pretend like you died today. Huh? He or she survived by, will be remembered by, was noted for, significant accomplishments have been, at the time of death was deeply engaged in, and he would like to be remembered as blank. Answer that however you would want. No copying. This is a bit of a tangent since we're talking about this, a little bit about end-of-life medical care. I did kind of like this one. Here's Pig with pearls. I decided to donate all my organs after I die. So why? Because if I do it before I die, it will kill me. Sometimes you ask stupid questions. I don't know what's annoying to myself. I think I'm so funny. It is of value to do an advanced medical directive. I would encourage it, right? Even if you're not my age. It's good to sign organ donation cards and be obvious with everybody how we would like those things to go. When it comes to the end of our life, the medical profession has made a lot of progress in helping us not have to suffer, and there is no need to endlessly prolong life. Not all doctors and people are as good at that as others, so it's good to be as obvious as we can about what we would like. So, we're going to have a first 30-second break, 30-second long break. Do me a favor, turn to somebody near you that you don't know and introduce yourself if you would. If you already know everybody around you, then point out what you think is the worst thing about them. 30 seconds, go. things that annoy you about those people. All right. Part 3. You guys are very gracious. Part 3. Facing the death of somebody we love. Sometimes a loved one dies suddenly and without warning. That awareness, as I just mentioned, is a kind of stark invitation to live well the time that we have. And I think to say now those things that matter. There are other times, however, when we have advance notice that somebody is going to die because of whatever diagnosis they've got. Now this is also heartrending, but it provides us some unique opportunities. And in particular, it gives us a chance to be intentional about what we do with the time that we have. It's been well said that if you can't add days to a person's life, add life to those person's days. I would suggest that when someone we love is dying, the greatest gift we can give them is our honest, loving presence. They do not need religious cliches. They do not need us to cheer them up. Thank you for not doing that for me. They just need us to be with us as they are. And us to be as we are, and allow them to be as they are. And sometimes we do this silly thing of all being strong for each other. I would have to say I'm a little more conflicted on this one than I used to be, but I often go to the hospital and there's a dying person in the room and the family's out all in the hallway and I go, how are you doing? Well, we're all being strong for her. I go to the patient, I go, how are you? I'm not being strong for them. Part of me says, it's like, oh, just knock it off. I mean, just be real. Now, when my niece Jessie, she had this first surgery here, then they turned over and did the surgery. Her mom couldn't be there, so I was able to fly out and just be with her. I will tell you that I didn't want to cry around her so much. Often when I wasn't with her, in an Uber, getting to the hospital or sitting in the cafeteria, I just cried a lot. We cried, of course, when I was leaving and a few other times. So I get it that so I'm not as quite as clear on that one as I used to be, right? But I think it's important that we be real, right, and be honest, and do not shield each other from tears. Or what if she starts crying? Well, eventually she'll stop. You run out of water or something. I don't know what it's okay. It is okay. I mean, I also think it's important to say these things. I've never seen anybody who regretted saying, thank you, I'm sorry, I forgive you, and I love you. And I've seen plenty of people who regretted that we didn't. I'll give you one recommendation. When my dad died, Dad was just maybe a little bit older than I am now, he had a brain aneurysm, and died that very same night or early that next morning. And we decided that we would each spend 2 minutes in the room by ourselves, because there were some things that I know that I'm really glad that I could say that I wouldn't be able to say in the presence of everybody else. I just felt better. So if you have that chance, you might want to do it. I mean, I told my dad, I was proud of him, I loved him, and thanked him. And I told him there's 2 things I forgave him for. One that kind of bothered me was the look. I never liked the look. And this other thing which never bothered me in the least, which I kind of felt like probably bothered him. I didn't want him to think it bothered me, it didn't. And I told him I loved him, and I'm glad I had that chance. If you missed that chance, he actually was Gary when I was a freshman in college. It was a friend of mine, no, it was a sophomore in college it was, and a friend of mine had died, and I found myself would sometimes talk to her. We're walking around the old 7433 Brightwood Drive neighborhood. Gary's a kind of weird. I like talk to her. Is that weird? And he said wisely, I don't know that she necessarily gets the words exactly, but nothing stops love from being communicated. I thought that was good. If you are there, now, if you have a loved one who's dying, several things. Sometimes this sprint turns into a marathon, right? So thank you for taking care of yourself. I suggest, you know how flight attendants tell you if we lose compression, oxygen masks will drop out of the ceiling? First of all, I'm not convinced that's going to happen. Just had to say that. But then they say, if you're traveling with someone who needs assistance, put your own mask on first. Some part of some of you, you know what I'm saying, that one of us, not me, man, I take care of the kid. Stupid self, but if the kid resists this and passes out, and you don't have your mask on, but the kid's resisting this, and you pass out, you both die. So put your own mask on first. In times of crisis, I suggest it looks like 4 things. The first 3 are physical. Sleep. You know how hard it is to sleep? Yeah, sleep. Nutrition. Food tastes like sawdust. I don't care. Eat. And exercise, something to take care of your body. None of this fixes anything, but it allows our bodies to be in a place to hold our spirits better. And then 4, something to nurture your spirit. For me, people who know me well know I absolutely love this. I have very long legs. I put this pad on the seat on the couch between my seats. I sit on it, I stick my head out the sunroof, and I drive with my head stuck out at sunset, looking for deer and owl and hawk and coyote and skunk and possum. I just love it. So that's why I'm so excited we had a bear. Did I tell you we had a bear in the school? So, we had a bear in the school. Anyway, but do whatever that is. None of that, it doesn't fix anything, but it allows us to be there. Yeah, Father Joe, but what if I go get a shower and she dies? Here's a truth I think I've come to be very confident about. No one dies alone. When we die, all those things that limit us from understanding how deeply connected we are dissolve away. And there are some people that seem to be private enough to wait till either everybody's gone or they're sleeping to pass away to be protective. So if they don't die alone. So take care of yourself. It's a loving thing to do for the world. Also this, if you're there, you might have noticed this, that when people are dying, the veil between this world and next is very thin, right? One of the things the Irish sometimes call a thin place. And people seem to move back and forth between those 2 worlds. I've seen it a lot. When Dad was dying, we would laugh and then we'd cry and then we'd pray and we'd keep doing all those things. At one point we were praying, I was holding my dad's hand and then Sister Peggy, my sister-in-law's hand, and we were praying, and then all of a sudden I felt Dad lift his hands up like this. Now Dad had never regained consciousness. I took my hands off because I didn't want people to think I was doing it, but he was like seeing something. So there's so much more to say. And we're going to move to part 4. Part 4, how would you finish this sentence? After someone dies, ... Where did I put the remote control? So, I was asking Gary what kind of medical leave you have here if there's a death in the family. And this is Gilbert, which is similar. Can I take time off for the death in the family? Well, it depends who dies. Can you be more specific? Tough place to work, huh? That's not here, because I had to make it up. Okay, so let's have a little prayer to kick off this one. This actually is, if this works, this is my niece, Catherine. When Dennis' kids reading a prayer.
My heart is sad. I miss her so. The world is not the same. I miss the way she looked and smelled, the way she said my name. Dear God, the world seems darker now. There's so much in my heart. I wonder how I'll be okay, since we are now apart. No one else could take her place. She means so much, you see. Please tell her that I love her, God. Give her a hug for me.
if you wouldn't mind, by way of a show of hands, I'm just curious, how many people here have had a loved one who died, say, in the past 10 years? Or, wow. Past 1 or 2 years? May God bless you in the mixture of emotions. I know that I do not know what it is like to be you. When someone we love dies, our world is changed forever. And there's a pain and a loneliness to death that I don't think anyone could even imagine except those who themselves lost deeply. I remember Father Don Wester, when Dad died, said to me once, it's like you become a part of a club that you never wanted to join. I got it, actually, because I kind of got it in a way I couldn't get. You know, from that slow motion moment when you get the news, to the loneliness of the drive, to the funeral procession, and when other cars go by as if nothing happened, to going through the things of a loved one who died, the emptiness of holidays and birthdays and anniversary and all those things our loved ones used to be a part of, watching other family members grieve, waking up in the middle of the night and crying because we ached to hold them again, right? To that growing awareness that they are never again walking into our arms. At the death of a loved one, life has changed forever. Me trusting the promise that love is forever gives me great comfort, that there's a life beyond what I can see, but it does not take away the pain. It is, again, both and. And because I'm afraid I'll forget to say this later, when I work with the folks who just had a loved one die, they're preparing the funeral, whatever, I always want to make sure that they are open to the both andness of it, and don't try to talk ourselves out of any of it, right? We are, I believe there's life after death, and it flat out stinks that they're not here at the same time, right? And that heartache doesn't take away my belief that love is forever. They're both real, right? And at the same time, the mixture of everything, watch how love shows up in sometimes surprising ways. For many of us, I think grief comes like waves. It pounds you for a while, and then you're calm. And it pounds you for a while, and then you're calm. And it pounds you for a while, and then you're calm. I don't think you can all the way predict, right? Either things I thought were going to be awful. I wasn't so bad. Next thing you know, I'm standing in the front of the frozen food counter at Schnucks and trying not to sob. How we grieve is affected by many things, right? What our relationship was like with the person, the level of support we receive from others, the messages we received about grief, how we talk to ourselves. You know, grief after a long, slow illness is similar to, but different than death of a sudden death. You know, we have so many reactions to our reactions, right? So when a person's been dying for a long time, we're often praying, please God, let them go, right? And we feel kind of guilty that they died, and we feel mad that we feel guilty, and it just piles up. This was before computers. I am really old. So I had a notebook, and I wrote down things that I'm happy about. And that wasn't the first column. Things that I'm sad about, things that I'm mad about, things that I'm scared about. I'm missing one. There's something else. Anyway. But it helped me because there was this wad in me, right? I didn't want it to all be just this one big wad. Grief can be especially complicated when it's death by suicide, right? Grief in this situation is often accompanied by so many more emotions. We're not always comfortable about talking about this, so I always invite it. See, you know, people are often really, can I say pissed? Angry at the person who died, who killed themselves. But we feel guilty that they died, like I should have done something. We don't feel like we're allowed to be angry, but we might be, because what a dumb decision, right? This permanent solution, right, to a temporary problem. And there's sometimes not as much support to talk about grief when it's death by suicide. Similarly, if it's the death of a child before birth, sometimes people, again, I will say a little bit about helpful things to not say, but, you can always have another. I didn't want this one? And there's so many things that just, it's sometimes about best, all that we can do is keep breathing. I always, if at the funeral home, I give people the suggestion, you don't have to think of something new to every single person who comes through the line. How are you? How am I? Right? Food tastes like sawdust. Yeah, I can't imagine I want to go on with my life, right? Or whatever. Say it's really hard, we're hanging in there, keep praying for us. It's really hard, we're hanging in there, keep praying for us. And a good friend comes by, my feet are killing me, whatever. But you don't have to think of something new every time somebody comes by. Terry Anderson was a chief Middle East correspondent for the Associated Press. He was working in Beirut in March of 1985, and you might remember the story, kidnapped off the streets and held hostage for almost 7 years. And he spent much of his time blindfolded and chained. And after his release, he was asked how he survived his ordeal. Perhaps those who are grieving can understand his answer. You just do what you have to. You wake up every day, and you summon up the energy from somewhere, even when you think you haven't got it, and you get it, and you get through the day, and you do it day after day after day. If people call to offer help, I say accept it. It makes them feel so good if you can. It's sad to me, there's all these things like, now I'm going to be alone at the event I used to have my husband or my wife there, right? How do I speak of the deceased? What do I have to do? Okay, so 3 children, 1 died. I've heard many people say, I have 3 children, 1 in heaven and 2 on earth. But you have to think of all these things. How do we do that, right? Sadly, and I don't like this, we often have to coach people with what is helpful to us. Who's got the energy to do that? But people will not get it sometimes. I've even said to people, how would you wish people would act around you now? And that gives me a cue for what might be helpful for them. Can I say, I'm going to say a little bit about talking to kids about death? Is that okay? And then we're going to get a break here. More annoying things about your neighbors. I'm glad Father Gary said I don't make a penny off any books I sell. So every single one of us is a volunteer, including Troy's wife, Emma, who does work for us. It's amazing people. We just want to get loving messages of Jesus thought and to feed hungry kids. But some of these that last prayer is from a CD in the back of the book, Sometimes Life is Just Not Fair, which is for kids, and it has, things, reflections for kids and activities and stuff to think about, and coaching for moms and dads and grandmas and grandpas in the back, because I never was taught how to do any of this. I'll race through 6 bullet points really fast when you're talking to kids. I'll talk even faster than I am now. If possible, it's good for a kid to be told of death by a parent or someone the child knows, and it's good to tell them if you can, as soon as possible after the death, so they don't hear it from somebody else. Be sure to give simple, honest, straightforward answers. It's really probably important to use words like dead and died, and it's okay to say, I don't know. To describe death, we might want to make that distinction, in kids' language, between what John Quincy Adams was talking about. We don't put them in the earth, we entrust their body to the earth, but their spirit lives on that part of them, which is forever. Do not burden the child, please, by telling them they need to be strong or be the man of the house now, right? Or telling them they should not cry. Children are often very literal. Of course, every personality is different, and all these things change according to age. But telling the kid that your loved grandma fell asleep doesn't help with issues around sleeping, right? We tell kids, rightly so, that our loved ones are with us in spirit somehow forever, which is true. But if you say Daddy is always watching over you, some kids are very literal. Does Daddy see you when I go to the bathroom? That's weird. Whatever. Thank you for avoiding those cliches. God needed another angel and all that stuff. God only takes the good ones. Yeah, that's going to motivate great behavior. It's also important to address the unspoken questions. Did I make that person die? I watch this statistic over the years, and I'm still surprised at how many kids at some point, if I was ever mad at Dad and he died, I thought I made it happen. So with a kid, and I encourage moms and dads to do that. Now, Timothy, this is not true, but sometimes kids think that they made Mom die. there won't die. It's not true, but sometimes kids think that. Is that something you think, Timmy? If Timmy says no, good, Timmy, because that's not true. Yes. Thanks for telling me that, Timmy. I hear you. No, Timmy, you didn't do that. Okay. Other questions kids have. Will you die now? Will I die now? Who will take care of me now? We can't all the way promise them what we can't promise, but we can assure them we'll do everything we can to be with them each step of the way. Is there anybody here that works with kids in group setting? I'm just curious, like teachers or whatever. Okay. So, I think it's important to deal with in a public setting, in a group way. Like, let's say one of the kids' classmates has a mom or parent who dies. A couple things you don't want to do is, you don't want that kid to be the kid whose mom died for the rest of his life, and you don't want to not acknowledge it. I typically make allies of the kids, right? So I don't know, I'm picking on Timmy. So Timmy's at the funeral. You guys, it's okay if Timmy cries sometimes. They tell me yes. Yeah, it is. It's okay if you cry too. Is it okay if Timmy laughs sometimes? Mm-hmm. Yeah, you don't have to think about it all the time. Anyway, I was having that conversation with the family. This woman named Carol had died in a parachute. Her 7th grade daughter, I was talking to her 7th grade daughter's classmates. This was a lady, Queen of Peace in House Springs, doing these very same things when she walked in to get some books. So you got that moment to make a decision. I'm glad I made this decision. I go, we were just talking about you and what it might be like for you. And I was okay if you sometimes cry, and sometimes it's okay to laugh, think about it all the time. I'm going to say a prayer now. We say a prayer with you. So she came over and kind of crying on my shoulder, and we said a little prayer. In response to the death of a loved one and all that it stirs up in us, it's okay to sometimes laugh and be happy. It's okay to sometimes weep, and it's okay to miss them for the rest of their lives. And if I were able to speak to every pastor in the universe or priest in the universe, I'd love them to acknowledge all of those things. Like, it's Mother's Day. We all gather with a happy heart. No, we don't. Right? So I did a wedding where the bride's mom died 3 weeks. Dad died 3 weeks before the service, and he had made her promise months before that if he didn't make it, she would do this wedding and not put it off. So at the very beginning, I welcomed everybody. I said, it's not lost on me in this day of joy that there's great heartache that Bob's not here. And it's okay on this day of joy that we have some tears. I said, secondly, it's okay that when there is that great heartache, it's also okay to laugh and to dance and to party. And if you ever dance with tears in your eyes, that's all right too. All right, we're going to get into our final point. Then we have a little word for the kids in each of us. A time for a little ridicule. We got a 20-second break. What's one thing that struck you to remember? I'll give you 30 seconds. Even if it's only never again to come to a presentation. There's something that you wanted to remember so far. What's one thing that struck you or whatever? Do you mind to take a 30 seconds to say that to somebody sitting near you? Go ahead. Before point 5, which is the top 10 things to say or not to say to someone who has a loved one die, I thought we would have a visit from my friend Big Al, because several people said you better bring Big Al. Big Al is my blue furry friend who comes out every Sunday after communion with a message for children. I try not to be jealous of the fact that he's much more popular than I am. He gets a little shy if there's people he doesn't know. I'm going to tell him you at least look fairly nice. Big Al, it's okay. Where am I? Where are you? Oh, Big Al, you're at the Catholic Student Center. Really? Why? Big Al, because we're here to talk to these people about, well, some really important stuff. Cardinals. No, Big Al. We're here to talk about what it's like when we have a loved one who dies. Sad. It's sad. You've had that, haven't you? Yeah. I know Big Al's friend Jimmy died not that long ago. Sorry. You're sorry that you're crying? Oh, Big Al, you don't have to be sorry that you're crying. You wouldn't cry if you didn't care. Jesus cried when his friend died. I call those tears holy water because they come from love. So Big Al, if I were to ask you, where's Timmy now, what would you say? With God. With God? We do. We pray our loved ones home into the arms of God. More, but our hearts. You're right. We keep the best of them alive in our hearts forever, don't we? Idea. What's your idea? That's good. Can I tell them? Big Al said that when you miss somebody you love so much that you can't stand it, you could ask God to give them what, Big Al? A hug. A hug? I'm sure God would do just that. Yes, you can say that. Go Cardinals! You wouldn't be clapping if we had lost. Part 5, the top 10 things to say or not to say to someone who is grieving. More pearls before swine. Hey, I think I read this, so I'll read it. Hey neighbor Bob, thought I'd stop by and see how you and your wife are doing. The angels took her. Oh my God, she died? No, the Los Angeles Angels gave her a stadium time. I need to find a better way to say that priest thinks he is so hilarious. Okay. When somebody has a loved one who dies, it's good that we say something, right? Otherwise, we sometimes leave them alone and leave them even in greater loneliness. I think one of the greatest mistakes we make is to do nothing. You've heard the phrase, the elephant in the room? The poem, called The Elephant in the Room, is by Terry Kettering, and it describes well the loneliness caused by our tendency to avoid people and their sadness. It goes like this. There's an elephant in the room. It's large and squatting, so it's hard to get around it. Oh, yet we squeeze by with, how are you? And I'm fine. And 1,000 other forms of trivial chatter. We talk about the weather, we talk about work, we talk about everything else, except the elephant in the room. There's an elephant in the room. We all know it's there. We are thinking about the elephant as we walk together, as we talk together. It's constantly on our minds. For you see, it is a very big elephant. It has hurt us all. We do not talk about the elephant in the room. Oh, please say her name. Please say Barbara again. Oh, please, let's talk about the elephant in the room. For if we talk about her death, perhaps we can talk about her life. Can I say Barbara to you and not have you look away? For if I cannot, then you are leaving me alone in a room with an elephant. So, if we don't say anything, we leave people alone. But there's also helpful things not to say. And sometimes are actually funny. This is an actual obituary page announcement from the Watertown Times in New York that states, "To everyone and anyone who was in any way involved in my husband's passing, I am not making this up. You get what she was trying to get at, right? Although sometimes kids are hilarious. So when Patty Bowman's mom died, and Patty was a first grade teacher at Assumption when I was there, her little boy Teddy, she described to me that one day she was crying in the kitchen, and Teddy saw her, and Teddy had heard things that people say, so to cheer mom up, he put his hand around her shoulder and said, he'd heard about heaven, I guess. He goes, "Don't worry, Mom, you'll be dead soon." Beyond that, I'm going to suggest 5 things not to say, 5 things to say. These are not the only ones. These are the ones that just happen to annoy me now. So, the first one, it's not really that bad. It's just that in a time of great heartache, it's not helpful. The first thing I would say is, "How are you?" Really? I already said a little bit about this. I jumped ahead, but how am I? What the heck? I just buried my daughter? Whatever. And anyway. Number 2, be strong. Really? It's corollaries, don't cry. Cheer up. You'll get over it. Don't think these things aren't said. 3, thank you for not saying any sentence that begins with "at least." Right? At least, what? You still have your mother. Or she didn't suffer. Or you have other children. Or it wasn't a long, slow death. Or it was a long, slow death. Or whatever. I always say to families before they go to the funeral home, I apologize. I don't think anybody should get to say any sentence that begins with "at least" except you. But people will. So I just want to have you not be caught off guard by that. Next, thank you for not saying anything that suggests this. Right? God never gives you more than you can handle, right? Really, what kind of God did that be? These are the other cliches I already mentioned, right? God never closes the door without opening a window. Only the good die young. I always have, if there's a eulogy, I always make it be in writing ahead of time. First, it makes people get it done and not ramble. The kid's doing a eulogy, a teenager, for his 85-year-old grandpa. His final line was, "Only the good die young." I go, "Dude, Grandpa's 85. You want to take that out? I go, "Yeah." And thank you for not saying, "I know just how you feel." Because no, you don't. Nor thank you for not starting talking about, "Yeah, my uncle's cousin died." No, thank you. All right. There are others. Like I said, those are just some that I find annoying right now. What are some good things to say? I always think it's good to say sorry and then shut up. Squeeze a person's hand, give them a hug, whatever. 2, I can't imagine what it must be like to be you right now. And if I could, depends on how close your other person, what would I know? This is a good way for a person to say, if I could imagine you, what would I know, right? Another one is, I'm pretty good at this. Here's what my point is on that. Thank you for not, well, it's not bad, but people say, "Let me know if I can do anything." Who's going to pick up the phone and say, "I need this"? So there was one of my heroes in this regard. I think of something, right? Hey, I got kids in carpool. Can I help you to carpool? Or I'm running to the store. Can I get you? This woman at Holy Infant, her husband died young, leaving with 3 young kids, and she said one of her neighbors showed up at her door, didn't speak great English, and she had this little thing filled with cleaning supplies, and she goes, "I am good at cleaning houses and bathrooms. Would you like me to clean your house?" And she was so grateful. She would have never in a million years picked up the phone and said, would somebody come clean my house? But she was so grateful. So I always say, think of something that you're good at and offer that. I can't read my notes from this far away. Oh my gosh, it was an honor to know your mom. Here's what I loved about her, right? Or, I never met your sister. What was she like? And then people often will tell me. I found that very helpful for folks. And we never know what difference we might make with an act of kindness. So, a few final announcements, a few moments for question, answer, ridicule, a guided meditation, and I'll have you out, as I promised I would. So, as Father Gary mentioned, they're going to sell books upstairs, whatever, somewhere. Big Al has a web page. We buy them at list cost, but at a discount, so more money goes to feed hungry kids if you buy them through us, but I don't care. Go to gospelvaluesonline.com. Big Al has a Facebook page. I don't do Facebook. I don't even know how to do Facebook or whatever, but it has the words gospel values in it and Big Al or something. And then if you like it, you get a link to a video of the homily I gave each week, so you can see how lucky you are and that Father Gary appreciates you. and I'll hang out afterwards. So, a few moments for question, comment, ridicule, whatever. Please.
Do you find that people who are, I don't know exactly how to say this, but
Nice and loud for people in the back.
Do you find that people who are very traditional and I'll say almost fundamentalist in their beliefs have a harder time coping when they lose a loved one like a child or that? And does it shatter their faith in God because that happened?
Did you hear the question?
Yeah.
It was great. Next. We all struggle with, nobody buries a kid without incredible heartache. No one should ever have to bury a kid. I just hate that for anybody. That shatters almost everybody's faith. It is real, I'll put it this way, it is really a grace, an important skill set to develop, to learn to see the world as both and not either or. And therefore, we're a lot less likely to go off in some deep end. I also think it's important to name honestly what we feel. I've long said what we don't deal with will deal with us, right? So if I'm sometimes when I'm very, very black and white rigid, it's because I don't want to deal with my other stuff, and then my world crumbles, right? So I've seen it. I can't answer statistically. I'd be going anecdotally. Great question. Any other comments? I'll give non-answers for. Yeah.
Father Joe, is acceptance the ultimate goal of grief, or is it something else?
I'd love to hear your perspective on that. Yeah, it is. Great question. One thing I wish I had said, I wish people would stop using the phrase stages of grief. That was a great insight by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, great German pioneer. I can't do impersonations, but I can do her. Watch out. She has a great voice. Anyway, I digress. Stages of grief suggest some kind of linear progression. I would rather say there's a bunch of elements of grief. But yes, coming to accept that my world is different and that I will go on without her and I find a new normal are all key things to move towards. Could you say more how you would answer that? Because I think you're going to have some great insight here. Because I'm coming off the fly on that one.
Well, I'm a therapist.
I know.
And that's a focus that, but how you get there is multi-layered.
Yep.
And everybody can get there in a different way. But I was asking on the basis that there might be something else besides acceptance, which is a freedom to be me.
I love it. Yes, and what acceptance looks like is different for various people. And actually, there is stuff beyond it, right? How many great things have been forged in the human soul through some heartache? Mothers Against Drug Driving, right? All these things that get changed in me. But yes, yeah, and who am I? I mean, becoming who I am is always evolving as well. But acceptance is one of the things we move towards it. But I always am a little bit worried. I do think that there's a healing. We name it, we bring it to God, honestly, we talk, I'm a big fan of people having counselors to talk stuff through. We find a new way to be okay. It's not the okay that we used to have. It's not the normal that I wanted. So I'm talking way too many words that aren't helping, so I'm sorry. Great question. Feel free after this presentation to talk to him. You'll get a better answer than that. Thank you, that's great. Thanks. One or two more? Yes, please.
I just had a comment something that someone said when somebody said they were so angry at God. Took my daughter, took my son, and the person did was a priest. But he just very kindly said, "Okay, how long do you want to stay that way?" And not to judge, not to say this is timetable. But just allowing that person to be that then, and...
Amen. Thank you. I'm glad you said that. That was actually in my notes. I don't know why I skipped that, but yeah, it's okay to be angry at God. I don't blame you. What the heck? Now, I don't believe God caused it. Yeah, but and people want to reject God for all kinds of reasons. I'm always wishing that they would reject, as long as they're rejecting the accuracy of who God is, right? That's why I told that story about Solomon Rosenberg and connected it to the crucifix. Because that's the God I believe in and know. Of course, there's also the other side of that God. Jesus stood before the tomb of his friend Lazarus and wept. Then he called him forth from that tomb. And that's the second thing we don't see. But you be man of God. Yeah. Thank you. Let people be. Let them have it. Not let them have it. Let them have that. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. That was a very kind answer to that priest. Yeah. Must not have been me or Gary.
Do you ever find yourself in a position to console someone who doesn't believe in God?
Yes. Have I ever found myself in a position to console someone who does not believe in God? Sure. Yeah. Not so often in my world, but I like to ask them what they see. Tell me about what you think happens next and go there. And there's been a few times where I say, I get it. I believe that there is more than this. Then some people think it just ends right there. But I'm never going to try to force that on anybody. I like to see what they do think happens, and that usually is my avenue to have a deeper conversation. Oh my gosh. Okay. Thank you. We're gonna. Please one more.
You're working on a new book. You want to tell us a little bit about what that is?
Well, thank you. Yeah, actually, boy, oh boy, I actually like it very much. Well, that was not guaranteed going in. And I finally heard back from the publisher after saying, now, don't wait until summer's over to suggest all these changes. They waited until summer was over and said, that's great. Whew. All right, so just change some punctuation on me. It's called Don't You Dare Forgive, and the subtitle is Unless ... And then the subtitle is Finding What You Most Deeply Want. So I have decided, I've run across the fact that forgiveness is so incredibly understood. It's a useless word sometimes. I hate to say this, like God and love. What does those mean even anymore? So, I've heard the story of the young woman who was shot to death at Catholic Supply. Her parents are in our parish, and when they caught his dog, the guy's, I call him Bob's, I'll speak of Bob, not both of them, I was talking about Bob's daughter's murderer. He said, Father Joe, I pray that guy never gets out of prison, quite honestly, because if he does, my boys are going to want to kill him, and then I lose them as well. He goes, Father, I don't expect them to forgive that man. I'm just praying that they can transition to something more positive. Dude, man, that is it. Yeah, the word forgiveness, what does that even mean? But transitioning to something more positive. I will tell you that digging into that book, I see what it is and isn't. We have so many misunderstandings about forgiveness. It means acting like no wrong was done. Who wants to do that? Or it's a one-time and done thing. And I could go on and on. I'm excited about it. I will tell you one other story that's in the book. So at Assumption, there was a young kid named Sean Weiser. I loved him. He was in our youth group. He was fun. Whatever, girls would go to him for fashion advice. They would look at me and know to just go the opposite. We just loved him. So a buddy of his was driving the car, and maybe a moment of stupidity behind the wheel, and Sean was killed. So Sean's dad, Mike, is this mountain of a man. I mean, when I hug him, I just get lost. And so Mike and I are standing in church getting ready for the funeral. When the driver of the car came in an ambulance, he'd gotten permission to get there. And I'm talking to Mike, we both saw this kid come in the ambulance out of the corner of our eyes, and he goes, "Wait a minute, Father Joe, I got to deal with this." And he walks over, he towers over this wheelchair. I held my breath for a second. Then he kneels down, opens his arms, and hugs this kid, and they sob together. I think that there is a grace that gets unleashed if we do the work. And I don't ever want to be glib about what forgiveness is. Yeah, so Kelly had the idea upstairs where they're selling books. If anybody, as soon as the book is done, it's supposed to be done in February. I mean, I'll come back someday and give a talk on all of it with you. But if you want to, when it comes out, I can email you or you can come out and sell some or something like that. That'd be helpful. As I like to say, of other books I've written, the author's a dork, but they're pretty good books. That's my favorite. Okay, so we'll end with this. You guys have been so sweet. This was, I don't know if this was a good idea or not, but I've done a lot of guided meditations over the years, and I have a CD of them. I decided to write one for this. And it's, so many people raise their hands at having lost a loved one. I know there's a lot of left residual or not, so I thought, well, I'm going to invite you in a minute. I'll put some music in the background to think of somebody that you love that died. And if you had a chance to say something to them, what would you say? And then I'll lead you on a little bit of an experience of that, okay? So let's see if this works. Am I great? Yep, I think this might work. Yes. It's going to be way too loud. So, I'm going to invite you to picture yourself in a good, safe place you like to be. Feel free to close your eyes if that helps you. I always fall asleep, so do whatever helps you. And if you don't mind, take a few good, deep breaths and become aware of having a body. Good, deep breaths, right? Become aware of being alive. Good deep breath of being you. Now imagine that you had a chance to say something to someone you love who died. Like, who's the first person that comes to mind, right? Could have been somebody died years ago. Could be somebody you love dearly. Or maybe your relationship was strained. But who's the first person that you think of? And you've had a chance to think about, if you had a chance to say something to them, what would you say? And what's the first thing that pops in your brain to say to them? Is there something else that you might want to say? So in just a moment, I'm going to invite you to actually say that with words or without. I'll give you about 30 seconds. So one more good deep breath. And I invite you to picture your loved one. it's just the two of you in a safe place. And when it's time, go ahead and say what's on your heart. And you sense that maybe they want to say something to you. Maybe it's something like, thank you, or I'm sorry, or I forgive you, or nothing. Maybe you just look. What do they say? Is there anything you want to say to that in response? And now it's time to say goodbye. And if you like, maybe you take their hand or give them a hug. Or however. And now I invite you to come back to being aware of being in this place. If you close your eyes, maybe it'd be good to open them. If you're able to have a sense of that person's presence, if you could keep it with you. I know clearly that some people use imagination more readily than others. If there was any blessing in that, I'm glad. If that was difficult or you fell asleep, it's okay. It's still true that love is forever. And even now we're connected with those who've gone before us in death. So I'll end with this prayer. We thank you, God, that you have blessed this world with our loved ones, with those precious people we held in our imaginations. Thank you for all the ways they made it a better world. Thanks for all the blessings they knew in life. Thanks for the blessings they know now. God, hear their prayers for us and help us live well these precious days we have been given. We ask all this in faith through Christ our Lord. Amen. You guys were so great to be here. Thanks so much. God willing, I'll see you again. It was an honor to be with you.